Hi, folks. Dale York, Just Fish Outdoors, and we're back with another edition. And this week we have a very special guest. His name is Vance Montgomery, and he's a pro bass angler. And we're going to pick his brain a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the best patterns, some of the best baits, and how to go about finding and locating and catching these schools of summer bass. Vance, come on in here. Appreciate you being on the show today. And
you bet, man. Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
I hope you and your family are doing all right and staying cool.
Oh yeah, yep. We're staying cool, staying busy. We're adding on to our taxidermy business. We're adding a new showroom to our building right now. So we got a little construction going on, but everybody's good and healthy and staying cool when we can because it's plenty hot outside right now.
Yeah. Oh, it's miserable. Folks, we're located in northeast Oklahoma, and boy, we're just suffering through a stretch of 100-degree plus days. And that's kind of what prompted me to do this segment. Vance, why don't you take us through your mental preparation when you're trying to fish these above 80-degree water temps in northeast Oklahoma?
Okay. Well, so, basically what I try to look at is, when it's summertime, basically like it is now, we're early July. And, if I want to go, to a Grand Lake or Fort Gibson or Skytook or Chinkill or wherever it may be, it may be a lake that I hadn't been to in quite some time. A lake is a lake, though, and I try to break it down as such as, I'm looking at, what time of the year is it, which is summertime. The temperature today is over 100 degrees and has been for several days in a row now. I think with maybe a heat index of like 110 today. So, but, and I know sometimes, and you got to really be careful going out on days like this. You got to really stay hydrated, and, it's definitely probably better to go out early daylight and fish a few hours. But, it's actually some of the best fishing of the whole year. This is one time, especially in Oklahoma, there's like Kentucky Lake and some of the Tennessee River fish that you can go ledge fishing, 8 months of the year and catch them. But Oklahoma tends to be an area that our fish like to live shallow.
Yeah.
And most of the time that's where they're at, and probably less than 6 foot of water. And, but this is the one time, and it seems like the hotter it gets, honestly, just like you and I was talking a few minutes ago, the hotter it gets, the better I've actually caught those fish. It's the one time of the year that it seems like the big fish all want to be in one spot. There's something about that particular location that makes it better than just going down the bank. And, so that's kind of what I'm looking for. When I'm going to go out to this lake, I'm thinking of the season. I'm thinking of the water temperature. I'm thinking in my mind, what baits, are going to, that I like to fish. Or it's maybe a big worm, a big crankbait, a big swim bait. I'm and then when I say big, everything that I fish this time of year, I'm fishing large in Oklahoma. If you're not fishing big bait, in my opinion, then you're not really going to catch a lot of big fish. You can catch a lot of numbers, throwing shaky heads and, small, Cincos and stuff like that. If a guy wants to go out and just catch numbers, that's probably the thing to do. But, as a tournament angler, I've got to try to catch the biggest 5 fish. And a lot of times, in our lakes, we have a lot of big shad in our lakes in Oklahoma. So you have to fish big. And so I'm going to go out, I'm probably going to get on the water at daylight in the mornings, and I'm going to probably go focusing more of my energy and thoughts more to main lake, not necessarily a lot back in coves. I'm going to try to fish areas that have, if there's current in the lake, I'm thinking about that probably top priority. I'm thinking, I'm looking at my electronics, and I'm looking for the channel swings, little ledges where maybe the river channel butts up against the bank, and then the area that I really like to fish is where it goes back away. Those are areas that are really prime places for those fish to gang up, especially when there's a little current. And if you can line up on those places right, ooh, you can have some unbelievably good fishing days this time of year.
Yeah, and don't you agree that usually when you find one or two fish, sometimes you can sit there and catch 10 or 12 fish before you ever move?
Oh yeah. You know, I was just talking to a buddy of mine just yesterday about, in 2012, we had like 23 days over 100 degrees. And thinking back, that was probably the best ledge fishing. I fished every day during that time. And it was some of the best fishing I've ever seen in Oklahoma. I mean, literally a lot of these ledges that I was fishing, they were little channel swings and little spots where the river comes close to the bank on the upcurrent and the downcurrent side. I mean, a lot of times if you missed a fish before your bait would hit the bottom again, you would have another bite. And you know, and until you would lose one, and you know, that's one thing that I will say that's really important about ledge fishing. If you hook a fish and you get him halfway to the boat or whatever, and he comes off, you know, most of the time he'll go back to that stool and they'll be gone.
Yeah, they'll
you
scatter.
won't ever get another bite.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
and that's usually, if that happens, I just move on. Now I may come back to that spot in a couple hours and let it rest, but that's one thing that, you know, everybody's like, well, they just quit biting. Well, it really isn't they quit biting. That fish you had on spooked them.
Right.
And it's better just to move on. And one thing that I move a lot when I'm fishing this time of year. Those fish are positioned for one reason, and that's to eat.
Yes.
And if you throw 10 casts on a spot, and you know you've lined up good on it, and you're getting your bait where it belongs, and you haven't got a bite in 10 casts, you need to go to the next spot. There's no fish there, or they're not active.
Yeah,
you know, you're not going to catch them right now.
Yeah,
they're really not hard to catch.
Yeah, exactly, because usually what happens, I've noticed this on some of the lakes I fish, is you can mark a lot of fish, and if those fish are out over the river channels, you're not going to catch those fish. And the only time you're going to catch those fish is, like you said, when they move up on these ledges or little shallow humps, something next to the river channel, when they move up there, they move up there for one reason, and that's to eat. And, you know, if you catch them up there, you can hammer them. But once they move off there, exactly like you said, you just might as well go find another spot because you're not going to catch those fish.
Yeah, because, I mean, matter of fact, I would say 90% of the time when you make a good cast on your very first cast, if those fish are there and if they're up there to eat, you're going to catch one on the very first cast. I mean, most of the time, if you've made 10 casts, move on to the next spot.
Yeah.
You know, that's something about ledge fishing. You don't have to fish 2 hours to see if those fish are going to fire up, you know, like you might have to in March. In March, you got to be patient. You know, those fish they might be there and they might only feed for an hour a day.
Right.
This time of year, that's not the case.
Yeah.
You know, they're feeding all day, all night, and they're just, when they move up on those spots and you see them with your electronics, most of the time they're there for one thing, that is to eat big shad.
Yeah, and folks, we really want to iterate here. Vance touched on a very good subject there when he was talking about current. You know, that's one of the keys. Pay attention to if the lake you're fishing has turbine discharges or is running water out of the dam. Pay attention to the times that particular dam is letting loose water. There may be only 3 or 4 hours a day where that dam is letting loose water and providing current in that lake, and that is key to when those fish are going to feed.
No doubt. That's a very good point. That's something I have saved in my phone, that it's called Oklahoma lake levels.
Yeah.
And, every morning, the first thing I do, probably even before I leave the house, I pulled up Oklahoma lake levels. I personally use Channel 6. CBS has a good website with all the lakes on it in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And I get on there and I'm looking to see, are they discharging water? How much water are they discharging? Do we have high water, normal water? Is it low level? You can answer all those questions every day on that. And that kind of helps, I think that's a big key to kind of the first piece of the puzzle on knowing how you're going to approach that day.
Right. I totally agree. I think probably one of the next, or at least in my humble opinion, to see what you think about it, but I think one of my next keys is water color. It seems like even in Oklahoma, even in the hot summertime, the dirtier or the more off-colored the water is, the shallower the fish are.
Yeah. I think that's one reason we probably don't have a lot of schooling in Oklahoma. Is our lakes tend to not be extremely clear, except maybe 10 Killer and Skytooth gets fairly clean, but like Grand Lake and Hudson and Gibson and some of Eufaula, those lakes, they stay off colored most of the time.
Yeah.
And that tends to make fish want to stay shallow. And, but if you start getting now, I think we're almost at 30 days without a rain.
Right.
Now all of a sudden, them fish, they're going to get a little deeper because the water's getting cleaner. But I still find that even when it's clean and they're really in that feeding mode, especially in the Grand River system, when those fish actually move up as a school and they really are predators, they're really not that deep. Usually I'm catching them in about 6 to 10, maybe 12 foot, and they're set up on those little edges and stuff, and they're just ambushing anything that comes by them. They're actually, and I will tell you this, when I'm setting up on spots like that, this is one thing that if you have current, and that kind of fishing is definitely going to be the best when there is a little current. And if they're generating power about every day. If a guy works his schedule around where you can go fish while they're generating electricity, I try to get downstream of where I feel like the fish are.
Yes.
And because I want to always present my bait into the current and bring it back, because the fish is always going to face into the current.
Yeah. Very good point. Always. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can go against the current, you're bringing it back at him. A lot of times the big crankbait, I'll tell you a little trick talking about crankbaits that I like to do, talking about maybe fishing 5 or 6, 7 foot deep. A lot of guys will throw a 6 to 8 foot deep crankbait. Well, something I like to do, and I call it hunting. I like to take a big crankbait, a BD-22 or a number 6 Strike King, something big like that, and I like to fish it in 5 foot of water. And the reason I do that, it won't run straight. I like to make it. I'll run it 4 or 5 cranks and make it run left, and I'll stop that bait and then let it rise just a second or two, then crank it real hard, and a lot of times it'll dart and it'll go the opposite direction. And those bass, when they're in those ledges and stuff, and you're cranking it over top of that, and you can switch directions with that. And that'll only happen on a bait that is not really meant to go that shallow.
Yeah.
If you're in 8 foot of water and you're fishing a bait that'll just barely get 8 foot, it'll run straight in a line. You can't really make it hunt. So that's why I like to fish a DD-22 that's rated for 20 foot deep and fish it. And 2 to 8 foot of water.
Right.
That is a really, really good, effective way. You know, the hard head is another thing that is a real good tool. You can still cover quite a bit of water.
Yes.
Kind of like fishing a jig, you know, with that swivel head. That's a really good ledge fishing. Then, you know, the old standby 10-inch worm. You know, that's still pretty hard to beat. I know it's been around forever, but a big worm will catch them just about any time.
You know, that plastic worm's been around since, I think, the late 50s, early 60s, and it's caught more big fish than we can count on that particular Texas rig big worm. It's just a constant producer. You know, you're talking about the deep diving crankbait. Me and a buddy of mine were down in Mexico earlier this year, and that's exactly the pattern you're talking about that we got onto. We were throwing the DB-22s in about 8 feet of water on the edge of a river channel, and we caught 115 fish in 3.5 hours that morning. So,
that's awesome. I mean, that's kind of the way it is when you get into that mode and you find those fish. You can have those kind of days.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of guys won't even go fishing this time of year. They're like, the fish don't bite when it's hot. But honestly, I think, you know, their metabolism is as high as it's going to get.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they're burning calories big time, and you know, you just got to be a little more careful going out. You got to stay hydrated. You got to think about the day before. I'm going fishing tomorrow. I'm going to drink a little more water than I probably typically would. And, you know, you got to use sunscreen and you know, take care of yourself and, you know, don't overdo it. Just fish a few hours and call it a day and try it again. But I mean, it's literally, you know, it's some of the best fishing as far as, and it doesn't change a lot. I think that's one thing I like about this time. Once you can find a school of fish, dang, it may be there a month.
Right.
You know, there's something about that spot, and until it starts cooling back off, and it makes those fish want to kind of start thinking about early fall.
Right.
You know, then they'll start kind of making that move when the water temperature starts falling. But until it does, those fish will be in that area. You know, they may be 20, 30 yards different, 50 yards different, but usually that school, they're kind of like buddies. They kind of hang out. They're all friendly this time of year. They're not fighting over spawning or anything like that. And they just kind of run together. And man, when you get one bite, usually you may catch 10 casts in a row, catch a dang 5-pounder.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's hard to beat right there.
Yeah, that's, you know, this time of year, it's so important to pay attention to your electronics. You know, if you have the good Lowrance HDS units on your boat, you know, this time of year is excellent for running side scan. That way you don't run over these fish. You're looking out to the side, looking at these places that you just described on your map, and you're locating these schools of fish on your side scan. You know, then you're dropping a waypoint, then you're turning around and coming back and fishing for that school of fish, but you're not running over these fish, especially when they're, you know, maybe less than 10, 12 foot deep, because that will spook the school, I guarantee you. So it's really important. Yeah, it's real important to get out there and use your electronics, spend a little time looking at these spots, going over these spots that Vance has just described. You know, you're looking for those inside and outside bends. You're looking for those little flats that may come up a little shallower out of the river channel than the surrounding area, you know, and you may have to graph, you know, 10, 12, 15, 20 spots before you find a couple of spots that's got fish on them.
Oh, yeah.
But
100%.
But
you know, and I'll say this, the you know, we've kind of talked about that ledge deal, and that's awesome. You know, that's probably the best pattern for catching numbers. But, you know, kind of going back to how do I approach a day? So say I went out and I've hit quite a few ledges, and for whatever reason, those fish are not there. Maybe there's not any current. You know, a lot of times we get this time of year and they might only run current an hour a day. and it might be in the middle of the night when they do it.
Right.
So, my second thing, and talking about the electronics, having good electronics is very essential to do what I'm going to say next. Is I spend a lot of time side scanning docks. I love to fish docks. Docks hold fish year round.
Mm-hmm.
And with side scan, now I can cover a lot of water without really fishing, So I'm sitting in my boat, drinking water, and one thing I will say about doing this, I think a lot of guys get into a hurry. They try to move their boat too fast. It's very important to go as slow as you can at an idle, without your foot even on the accelerator, and you're idling past these docks.
Yes.
And I'm doing one thing. I'm looking for structure, because lots of people put brush piles and stuff around these docks, for crappie or for bass or for just habitat, and you can spend a couple hours grafting and saving waypoints. Every time I find a brush pile, I'm saving it. Then I may go 200 yards and say, I might have found 5 brush piles. Now I'm going to turn around and I'm not going to fish all 30 of those docks.
Right.
I'm going to go back and I'm going to fish those 5 brush piles that are going to give me a higher odds of catching a big fish. A lot of your big fish love to sit under those docks, good shade, and if they've got a little brush or something around them, I mean, that's her home.
Yeah.
She stays there year round. She's probably not venturing. Those are, to me, a different group of fish.
Yeah.
There's that group of fish that live out on those ledges, and they move and they school and they feed in groups, and they kind of live that life of moving around the lake a lot.
Yeah.
But then you have another group of fish that are more homebodies, and it's, I love doing that. I like fishing docks. 10 years ago, I was not a big dock fan. I was like, they're a pain to do. But once, I made myself kind of learn that and get confidence in how many big fish there is that live around all these docks anymore.
Right.
Probably in Oklahoma, fishing Eufaula, Grand, Hudson, Gibson, that's got lots of docks on them. That if you're not fishing docks, you're probably having a lot of days that you're not getting any bites.
Especially this time of year.
It's a lot easier to just go down an open bank and cast and wind. But if you'll get in and get behind and, pitching under walkways and using your electronics to find that structure, then cast to where that's at, a big worm, a big jig. A lot of times I'll use a 3/4 or 1 ounce jig I may have a full size brush hog as a trailer.
Yeah.
I'm fishing big baits, 10, 12 inch worms. Those will get you some big bites this time of year. If you'll fish slow, take your time, keeping the black bait in the strike zone, in those bushes, in those brush piles, you'll get your arm jerked off.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to have good electronics on your boat. At being Lowrance Pro Staff, I get that question asked a lot. Why should I spend the money to do that? And folks, what it does, it makes you a more efficient fisherman, just as Vance just outlined. He talked about going up a cove, maybe passing 30 docks, but only putting a waypoint on 3 or 4 of them that's got brush under them.
Yep.
Well, what that does is that totally eliminates all that time that you'd fish those 20 or 30 docks. You go right back to the high percentage spots, and it helps you catch more fish in a shorter amount of time.
I can tell you this, to be, not everybody wants to tournament fish for sure. A lot of guys just want to go have fun with their families or their buddies and catch fish. But one thing I've learned, and I think it's even changed in the last maybe 3 or 4 years, even more, but technology has really, really come a long ways on really having electronics that you can see fish.
Yeah.
You know, and now if you're going to tournament fish and you're going to be successful, you better be learning how to use it.
Well, you better have you better have all the equipment, because if you don't, you're going to be fishing for second. You're going to be fishing for second place. I guarantee you, you're not going to be up there at number one.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. I mean, you've got to. There's some days you can get away. You know, when the fish are in the willows or they're in the bushes. You know, and they're up shallow. You know, I don't know if. You know, I'm even hearing guys though talking about using the forward-facing sonar to look in bushes in 2 foot of water now.
Yes.
You know, I haven't been successful making that work yet. I've tried it some this year, but really I like using it on the ledges and the docks. That's my deal. Where I'm looking under docks and I can. You know, I can see there's a brush pile in the back left corner of that boat slip.
Right.
Instead of making 10 casts on that dock, I'm going to make 1 or 2 to that one spot. Because more than likely, if there's a fish there, that's where he's going to be.
Yeah, it's what I call fishing the spot on the spot. You know, you may be fishing a little hump, and that hump may be 20, 30 feet across, but somewhere on that hump there may be a little rock pile, and that's where all those fish are going to be gathered up around that rock pile. So that's what that new electronics allows you to do, like Active Target, is it allows you to find that spot on the spot. So instead of trying, spending an hour there fishing that whole 30-foot diameter hump, you're fishing exactly where the fish are. You're fishing.
Yeah, I mean, you can literally watch your bait run through the school of fish.
Right.
And see how they react to it. Am I throwing the right thing? Is it spooking them? You can answer a lot of questions.
Oh, boy.
20 years ago, you just had to fish.
Right.
But now, if you're not taking advantage of that as a tournament guy, then you're probably ought to quit tournament. You're just not going to be very successful.
Yeah,
There's too many guys that are good at it.
Yeah, maybe you need to take up golf or something. But
no doubt. I mean, or just go fish for fun. Not everybody wants to be that intense, but if you're going to really be competitive in bass fishing now, the world has changed in the last 3 years.
Oh boy, that forward-facing
really
sonar.
has.
Yeah, that forward-facing sonar has changed everything.
It has, and some of it I like, some of it I don't. Sometimes I wish that never would have been invented.
Yeah, I hear you.
It has been, and if a guy's going to still be competitive, you're going to have it, and you're going to have to learn to use it. A guy needs you've got to use it too. You're not going to just go out and I tell guys this all the time that ask me about the sonar equipment. Don't expect to be excellent with it the first time you go out. You've got to learn the system.
Right.
And you've got to learn how to use it, and you've got to become confident in what you're seeing. One of my buddies, Todd Huckabee, he's a crappie guide, and I fish with him some just for fun, and the guy's incredible with electronics now. I mean, but he's doing it every day,
right?
And he's looking at those fish every day, and I mean, he's looked at it so much now that he can tell you if it's a crappie or a bass or a catfish or a carp.
Sure.
And then, man, when you start getting that good with it, and I'm getting better, and a lot of it's because of him.
Yeah.
And that's even a good thing to talk about too. Is if you buy this electronics and you really want to get good at it quickly, is maybe go with a guide a day or two and let him.
Yeah.
Man, he can teach you in a day or two what it might take you a couple of years to learn on your own.
Yeah, I get calls being the Lowrance Pro staff where we go out and get on people's boats that have the new sonar,
Yep.
and
You bet.
show them how to tune it up, show them what they're looking at, give them some tips and tricks, for a couple hours, and
Right.
help
Yep.
kind of flatten out that learning curve. But
Oh,
there's no
yeah.
substitute for time on the water. That's the
There's
big
not.
thing right there. It's it is not a magic arrow that you can put on your boat and immediately start catching fish. Doesn't quite work that way. Yeah, it still
No.
takes some time on the water.
I think bass are a little harder probably to catch with forward-facing sonar than like schooling fish or a crappie or something like that.
Right.
They're not as spooky from what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Bass are very, very. They're
Oh yeah.
they're if you get very close to them, they're spooky.
Yeah, they're gone.
Yes, you've got to be a lot more stealth than I ever imagined.
Yeah.
People a lot of times don't think about making noise in your boat or, slamming a lid or hitting something with your trolling motor or running, stopping and starting your trolling motor and just making a lot of noise. Those are little things that can make you or break you now. And a lot of us guys that are really studying sonar are finding out how much that we really didn't know about fishing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things that I used to think was a big deal, but now I'm like, that wasn't really that big a deal.
Yeah.
It don't really matter.
Yeah.
But then some of the things like noises.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, we could do a whole show on on things that we're learning, looking at this forward-looking sonar like active target. I'm with you. I've learned so many things. It's just surprising how many fish you actually were around that you didn't catch, that were totally neutral or negative about the bait you were throwing, could care less. And versus now that you see the fish, and you may run across a bass sitting in a tree that's a 4 or 5 pounder. You may fish for him for 10 minutes and he's not interested in anything you throw. And you come back an hour later and whatever you got on the rod, pitch it in there and he eats it. It's just it's very very difficult.
A lot of it's timing. I think when I'm out and I'm practicing for a tournament, especially if it's on a lake that I know fairly well, and it's a spot that I know it's a producer. But I went there first thing in the morning and tried it and never got a bite.
Right.
I think a lot of it, just like you said, it's timing. I may go back and practice that same spot 3 times in a day.
Yeah.
If I see fish there and I just didn't get bit,
right.
I'm probably going to go back and try it a couple times.
Yeah.
It could be a school of sand bass, or it could be a 4 or 5 big carp sitting there. I'm not good enough at it yet that I can tell you for sure that that's a bass.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah. Well,
especially if it's only a couple of them.
Yeah,
on the bottom.
And a lot of that goes back to what we were cluing in on earlier about them generating water, pulling current through the lake. You may find a school of bass on a particular spot and fish for them, and nothing's going on. But as soon as they open those generators and start that current flowing through the lake, that just turns those fish on like a light switch. And you can go right back to that point, that spot where you've seen those fish and catch almost every one of them.
Oh yeah, no doubt, absolutely.
All right,
another thing that
let's didn't mean to cut you off there. Let's recap a little bit. Let's pick your brain and let's talk about your top 5 baits for a hot summertime. Fishing. What do you always have tied on or getting ready to tie on?
Well, so if I'm going to pick 5 baits in the hot summer, catch big fish. So I'm going to always have a spook. I like, top water's always a player this time of year. And something that I've learned about in the last few years, I used to think, it was just an early morning deal. But one thing that I'm definitely become very confident in is to throw in a top water a spook or, some type of big walking type bait in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
I used to think, if it wasn't cloudy, I'm not throwing a spook in the hot summer sun. And, last year I had one of the best days I've ever had at 2 o'clock in the middle of the day, and it was 97 degrees.
There you go.
And they were in 2 foot of water.
Yeah.
They were in 2 foot. And,
Yeah.
and they were, I've seen them blowing up big shad. I picked up a spook first cast, caught a 7-pounder.
Oh, wow.
And then within two hours, I had probably my best five, 25, 26 pounds.
That's
so
awesome.
That's one of my baits. My second bait is probably going to be, I would say a big crankbait is number 2. My third choice would probably be a big worm. My fourth bait would probably be a 1-ounce spinnerbait, and my fifth bait would probably be a wobblehead, some type of wobblehead with a, I use tight line UV a lot. I use their trailers. I use Gene LaRue's hardhead most of the time. I also use Masu's got a really good hardhead as well.
Yeah, I like the Gene LaRue as well.
Those are good baits. You can cover a lot of water with them. If the fish are really, really tight to the bottom, that wobblehead will a lot of time catch them when nothing else will.
Yeah.
But that's probably my favorite bait. The fish either, I'm probably going to do 2 things most of the time, or 3. I'm going to topwater fish a little. I'm going to fish current on main lake channel swings. And then if that doesn't work, I'm going to go to the docks, and I'm going to look for brush piles, and I'm going to concentrate my efforts on brush. If the other 2 don't work.
Yeah.
It's a little slower. You're not going to cover as much water. But, if there's not current, and, the dock deal is usually the best thing to do in Oklahoma after your topwater bite's gone in the day. If that's, and I want to go back to that just a minute. Don't just put it away. Even if you didn't get a bite on your spook in the morning, some of these little wedges that come up pretty shallow, a lot of times my first cast is a spook.
Yeah.
I want to catch that real active fish that's real aggressive, and he'll come up out of the school. I can catch him without bothering the rest of the fish before I ever make a cast into where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you can kind of get a bonus fish doing that, and it can be, especially if you got just a little bit of wind, it can be bright and sunny. You can catch them just as good, if not better, on those kind of days on a topwater.
Yeah.
And a crankbait's always great. You can cover lots of water with it. It's a good ledge type deal. You can really hit those ledges. You can, if you've got good sonar, you can even watch your crankbait go through those fish and see how they're reacting to that.
Right.
And, a lot of times if I get bit on a crankbait and say, I make 4 or 5 more casts and I haven't got another bite, I'll lay it down and I'm going to pick up that big worm and I'm going to give them something a little slower.
Right.
And that usually will get another bite or 2.
Yeah.
And until you lose a fish, a lot of times you can sit there and just catch them and catch them and catch them.
Yeah.
And but if you don't, you got to keep moving. There again, recapping. Summertime fishing is a lot of kind of the old Van Dam theory, run and gun.
Right.
you got to cover water. I may fish 30 spots in a day at Grand Lake, and there may only be 3 of them that are any good.
Right.
And that's the way you got to look at it. You can't get frustrated because my best 2 spots that I always catch fish on aren't good. You just got to keep going.
Exactly.
And they'll be somewhere. They're going to bite.
Yeah.
They're going to feed every day.
Right.
And and then and I guess recapping as far as I'm going to stay on this kind of pattern as long as it's staying hot. When the water's in the 80s, when we probably even got 90-degree water right now.
Yeah.
Until that water probably drops back into the 70s, I'm going to stay on that kind of summer type pattern. And then once that water starts adjusting and the days start getting shorter, which, believe it or not, is usually about the 1st of September.
Yep.
In Oklahoma, our fish will start changing.
Yeah.
And
that pattern
that
will go away.
Yeah, and it becomes a hard time.
Yeah.
That's the time of the year that some fish are still out on ledges, and some have already moved into the very backs of pockets.
Right.
And they're just really scattered, and that's the time of year that you just got to put your trolling motor down and cover water.
Yeah.
But right now, the summertime deal, look for them big schools. It's fun. It's the funnest time of the year, in my opinion. If you can fight the heat and you can live with that, stay hydrated, go out and, get on the water early and fish till noon and go home.
Yeah.
And you'll have some of the best fishing of the year.
Well, that's great information, Vance. I appreciate you sharing some of those tips and secrets with us.
You bet.
I totally agree with you that the only bad thing about this time of year is the heat. You can catch a lot of fish and you can have a great time. It's just a little rough on the fishermen. It's not so rough on the fish. It's just rough on the fishermen. So, folks,
they're active.
Get out there. Use some of these tips and techniques that Vance and I have discussed today. And Vance, thanks for being on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today and give us some helpful tips and hints and talk about some of your great patterns that you're using. Folks, if you need some taxidermy work done, go over to Vance's Facebook page. It's Vanmar Taxidermy, Vanmar. He is just a award-winning, awesome taxidermist, and just does some of the best work that there is around. So really, really go over and check out his Facebook page. Get in touch with him if you need some taxidermy work done, and I guarantee you will not be disappointed. So, go on over. That's Vanmar Taxidermy, Vanmar Taxidermy. They're located in Claremore, Oklahoma, and they do work all over the world. So go check him out. He is awesome, and he does a fantastic job. And once again, Vance, thanks for being on the show today. And folks, get out there, enjoy some of this hot summertime action. Be careful, stay hydrated. This is Dale York and Vance Montgomery for Just Fish Outdoors saying, we'll catch you later.